So the dust is settling, or at least we're being asked to believe it is. 2 weeks of ceasefire after the most reckless rattling of nuclear-adjacent sabres we've witnessed in a generation. Threats to end civilizations. And now we wait, watching the pieces fall, trying to work out exactly what just happened. If the early signals are to be believed, and they deserve intense scrutiny before acceptance, Iran's fundamentalist government remains intact. The Revolutionary Guard emerges stronger, more emboldened internally with greater influence over the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow passage through which a fifth of the world's oil flows every single day. And now, extraordinarily, the potential to impose tolls on global shipping through waters they've just successfully defended. The regime that Washington promised to bring to its knees may be about to charge the world rent. So I ask the question plainly, what has this actually achieved? Because something has been destroyed here, quite effectively, quite literally in fact. The debate is simply which thing it was. Was it Iran's capacity to threaten its neighbours? Or was it something harder to rebuild? America's moral authority, its credibility with its allies, its claim to lead a rules-based international order it helped create and is now the primary architect of its dismantling. Let's be honest about what happened. America's allies were not consulted, they were informed, or worse, they read about it alongside the rest of us. The architecture of Western consensus built painstakingly across 8 decades of difficult diplomacy, the very system that won the Cold War without firing a nuclear weapon, was treated as a bureaucratic inconvenience by one man operating on instinct and ego. Then came regime change, an ailing man assassinated and replaced by his son. And in that single decision, the already fraying pretense of international law, the idea that there are rules, that sovereignty means something, that targeted killing of heads of state crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed, that pretense didn't bend, it snapped publicly, irreversibly. The cruelest irony is this: the Iranians who despised their government were not liberated by this assault, they were fused to it. Millions of brave, furious people who had taken to the streets at enormous personal risk to protest, who represented exactly the internal pressure that might have forced genuine change, are now rallying to the flag, because that is what external assault does. It has always done this, throughout every empire in history that mistook bombing for liberation. You do not free people from their governments by giving those governments an enemy to point to. You give the government exactly what it needs to survive. This is not a new lesson. It is simply one that the American empire, and I do use that word deliberately and carefully, as I explain at length in my book of the same name, has consistently refused to learn. You can destroy, you cannot compel. You can shatter, but you cannot build. The most formidable military apparatus in human history, with aircraft carriers, stealth bombers, precision munitions that can thread a needle from 30,000 feet, has demonstrated across 25 years now, from Baghdad to Kabul, now to the Persian Gulf, that none of it translates into the ability to impose a political outcome. Military supremacy and strategic wisdom are not the same thing. Confusing the two is the privilege of empires in the late stages of their arc. And that word arc brings me to the image I cannot let go of. A narrow stretch of water, contested, strategically indispensable to the global economy. A moment where a great power throws its full weight around and watches the world reorder itself. Not in the direction intended, however. 70 years ago, it was the Suez Canal. Britain, still wrapped in the tattered robes of its imperial self-image, launched a military adventure in Egypt. It looked decisive, but only for about 72 hours. Then the Americans told them to stop, and Britain stopped. And in that stopping, in that humiliating reversal, something became visible to the entire watching world. That's something that could never be made invisible again. The British Empire was over. The canal had not sunk it. The empire had sunk itself. The canal simply made the truth undeniable. Now, look at the Strait of Hormuz. Another narrow passage in the desert. Another moment where the gap between self-image and reality became impossible to bridge. Another empire discovering that there are limits to what force can purchase. Empires do not end with a single catastrophic defeat. They end with a long series of choices, death by 1,000 cuts, choice that seemed bold in the moment but ruinous in retrospect, made by men who confused dominance with leadership and military supremacy with wisdom. The tragedy is never the decline of power itself. The tragedy is the human cost scattered across every step of that decline, paid by people in Tehran and Tel Aviv and Kyiv and Gaza, and who never got a vote on any of it, and who deserve so much better from those who claim to act in their name. History, as always, will be perfectly clear about this moment. The question, the only question that really matters, is whether enough of us are actually paying attention now to demand something different